All right. Thank you for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here, Monday through Friday, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, live on YouTube and all affiliate podcasting platforms. Mark Scheeren is my guest. And Mark, you are. You basically run a group that helps people cope with addiction, and I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, the how you think the COVID-19 emergency is relating to addiction right now.
Well, we know that uh, overdoses have increased by 42% in the last 6 months over last year, over the year prior. That's not a small number. You know, that's a lot of people in trouble and or dying needlessly. Um, so it hasn't had a good effect. One of the things they did, which uh, they've sort of pushed this whole agenda with um, Suboxone and Methadone, and they freed up, basically 28-day supplies of Methadone, thinking that would curb it. And it's almost like the mask thing, where everybody has to wear a mask, everybody has to behave in a certain way. Well, with addiction, we've gone in a very pharmaceutical direction where one size fits all for these heroin users, and everybody should be on Suboxone, everybody should be on Methadone, and we've sort of forgotten that people can make decisions about themselves um, that are good and valid. And so this solution of sort of putting everybody on Methadone, or that attempt, hasn't really been working to curb overdoses. They thought that if they freed up this sort of channel of resources to the pharmaceuticals, that they would have a 50% drop. And it's gone just the opposite direction in the last 6 months. So COVID is certainly isolating healthy people um, endlessly, with no relief in sight. Doesn't seem to help this population. I can tell you that.
Right, right. Now, the whole business of putting people on things like methadone. I mean, to me, that I mean, and I'm speaking here as an outsider. I don't have direct experience, but I mean, I would think that that's just another addictive drug. I mean, and in fact, in a way, it could even be worse
Yeah,
than heroin. Would not maybe a more holistic approach be better to help people get off of addictions?
yeah, yes. The answer is to tell people the truth, and the truth is people get over addiction at an incredibly high rate if they're left to do so. If they're not
Mm.
filled with a bunch of mythology that they have a disease for the rest of their life and that they're broken and it'll always be a battle. If you eliminate that messaging, people get over this problem, even heroin users, to the tune of over 90% when you factor in age. In other words, as we get older, we naturally move on with our lives. So we know this from some of the largest studies ever conducted on addiction in the world. The NESARC study had 43,000 people over a decade span. So it's not like we don't know this. It's just not talked about because the agenda is money. It's a $36 billion industry to keep people in a system that tells them they have a disease they don't have. Now, the methadone issue is something we should address because methadone, Suboxone, replacement therapy, there are cases where it has some validity. If somebody is constantly overdosing and they know they're going to continue to get high and that's their agenda, and they don't believe they can get better, putting them on basically heroin light, which is what methadone is, um, might save them from dying. But that's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the people with a problem. Most people aren't out there overdosing. That's sort of a myth. So most people, if we gave them the alternative message, what you're describing as a holistic idea, um, they would do better. They don't want methadone. They don't want this idea that they have to be on a medication for the rest of their lives. They don't believe that. Inside they know that they can move on, and at any point they could stop. So I think before we start putting people on medications for life, we should probably be telling people that the odds are so in your favor that you're going to stop, right? That
Right,
message is
exactly.
right? I mean, why wouldn't we tell people that? But we don't in the treatment industry. Most people in the industry don't even know that statistic exists. It's
Right. I
shocking.
mean, I get the fact that it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that actually it sounds strange, but by keeping people on these substances, the government, I mean, actually supplies hospital, gives hospitals money, and I mean, in a way, not to compare, but it kind of there's a similar institutional thing with COVID itself, in that when a hospital reports that somebody died from COVID, they get money,
Right.
even if they didn't, or
That's
even if they might have had COVID, but that wasn't the main cause of death,
right.
and that there's this phenomena um, of doctors being told to put cause of death as COVID in their opinion. And these are doctors who have been filling out forms declaring death for decades, and all of a sudden the government's coming in and telling them what to do.
Right.
So,
Right.
you've got that element to it,
Yeah.
and it's a very brutal thing. I mean, it's something we could unpack in terms of why the government would do this, and that's an interesting subject. But they do it, and they're certainly doing it with the lives of people who are on these substances. And but I want to talk about what if someone is on a one of these substances, and it is a very tough thing. I mean, it is addictive, and you're going to have to go through a very tough time to get off of it. I mean, what do you advise? I mean, short of taking these other horrendous drugs. I mean, I've heard things as simple as having someone take a look at their nutrition. A lot of people don't have the right diet. They're eating sugar, and they're not well balanced in terms of nutrition, or even they might have vitamin deficiencies. I mean, isn't that a place to start in terms of beginning your recovery?
Well, a couple of things. Recovery itself is a trap as well. So I would take away that term and I would say, people have three motivating factors in life. One is we have free will, we have the pursuit of happiness that's intrinsic to the human nature, and we have autonomy. We're our own creature with our own secrets and inner life, right?
Right.
So what I teach people is, first, we have to get rid of the addiction mythology, and that is that you're sick, broken, and diseased, because the disease concept is a myth. You are not compelled to use a substance because a substance is not a virus. It doesn't think, it doesn't have motives, it doesn't have a desire to live, it doesn't do any of those things. So the first thing we need to do with people is take the 80-year cultural paradigm of disease and wipe it away with the fact. And the fact is that 90% of people, no matter how bad their habit is, whether it's heroin, alcohol, crystal meth, they stop when you factor in age. That's the number one thing we need to do. So we need to eliminate mythology that keeps you distracted from making choices. Then we go through, now that's a big process. I mean, in my book, it's 450 pages to eliminate all the myths that we've been teaching people, that
Mm-hmm.
there's a loss of control, that they can't stop. So we have to eliminate that. Then the question becomes, do you have to have a purpose-driven life? Do you have to have nutrition? Do you have to deal with underlying causes? Do you have to deal with all these things? Well, we looked at that and we found that no, believe it or not, people that have crazy lives sometimes just quit and have crazy lives. When you get rid of the mythology, then people can determine whether or not the utility of that drug in their life is worth it. Does it actually align with their pursuit of happiness anymore? So there's a lot to unpack here that we're talking about. I'm going through a tremendous amount of information, but fundamentally, they don't have a disease. They don't have a loss of control. They are in control every time they take a dose of drugs. If you eliminate that idea, regardless of their situation in life, they can quit drinking and drugging. So, and we know that.
No,
We've
I
been
mean
doing this for
it's
30 years.
brilliant. I mean, in a way, it's your own personal, as you say, free will. You ask yourself, do I need this? Is this something, it's self awareness? You're
That's
aware of what you're doing. Like, is this something that you know I want to do right now? What are the consequences? How am I going to feel later on? You use the power of reason, which we all have,
that's
to
exactly
talk.
right.
You talk to yourself. Some people say you're talking to God. That's fine. But the point is you're looking within, and you're saying, you're having the conversation. What should I do here? Why is this important to me? Do I really want to do this?
That's right.
And I mean, in a way, it gets to the basic function of being human being. I mean, why we're different than the animal kingdom.
That's
We have
right.
the ability to reason. We can think
That's
about these things. We can look at what we're doing. We can control our own lives and our own destiny, basically.
Yeah, you're bringing up a philosophical issue that's important. In the freedom model, we have a chapter called causes versus reasons, and the addiction industry says you are caused to use by your trauma, you are caused to use by your depression, you are caused to use by these anxieties you have, PTSD. I mean, and there's a whole reason why the mental health system has gotten involved with addiction that has to do with funding as well, when the laws changed for funding. So we connect a causal relationship between the normal aspects of life that are difficult. We all have them. We all get depressed at some point. We're all anxiety ridden at some point. We have struggles, we have tragedies, and we connect it in a causal relationship with drug use. And that's what treatment does. What I do in the freedom model is I say, wait a minute, isn't there something between the event, trauma, whatever it might be, and your drinking and drugging called reasoning? Not causal relationship. You're not a minion of the world. You're not just blindly a victim and then finding a needle in your arm, without any reasoning behind it. So we have reasons for use that take reasoning. Now, I'm being very explicit here because people say things to themselves without realizing it. I got anxious and I had to get high. No, you didn't have to get high. Lots of people have massive anxiety. The entire third world is filled with anxiety, and not all of them get high and drunk, right?
That's right.
So we can't just throw out all these people that have gotten over the problem that never had the problem, but yet have all these other human issues that we all deal with. So that's something we looked at in a lot of detail in the freedom model. Yeah,
No, that's amazing.
Every time you take a dose of drugs, simply put, you're using your powers of reasoning because you see a benefit in that experience at that time.
That's right. And you have to ask yourself exactly what are the benefits, and you'll realize that they're not very good. I mean, and look, what you're saying is in the sense that the whole rotten psychology industry, I don't know whatever you want to call it,
Yes.
this kind of interlocking industry of social scientists of
Yeah.
all different stripes, they have a good deal of investment in the idea that somehow external factors are responsible for who you are.
Yeah.
Like poverty is responsible for your criminality, when it's not, because
Right.
99% of people who are poor are not criminals.
Right.
They're trying to get to work. They're trying to find a job. They're trying to live their lives.
Exactly.
This whole idea that, these externals, people can overcome these things. And you, as you say, and quite accurately, Mark, things like depression and anxiety, that's normal. That's part of being alive. We all, for millions of reasons, deal with things that make us depressed or anxious in the
Right.
course of a day. I mean, if you have extreme depression, then again, you look within and you say, what's going on in my life? And you think about it, because depression is nothing but suppressed anger.
Right.
And you learn, you ask yourself, you have that conversation. Why am I angry? Maybe for good reason, probably for good reason. But the point is that by having that conversation, you're able to control the situation. You don't have to do destructive things. It's not rational, and we all are rational people.
Right. And here's the interesting thing. When I had a drinking and drug problem back in the 80s, I was just a young man, but I really believed that I needed this substance to be happy. I fundamentally believed that was my ticket to happiness for 6 years of my life. And it eventually got to the spot where I was doing it daily. And I was getting up in the morning about 10 o'clock, having a beer to get rid of the shakes, and then I'd smoke some weed and I'd do some cocaine, and this was my life. And then I one day I got into a car accident, and it was fairly serious. And I said, how far do I take this? How much further do I take this? But here's the interesting part. I quit that day. I detoxed for 3 days in a bathroom, a dorm room bathroom at college. I locked myself in this tub area in the local, dorm room public bathroom. I sweated out, I shook, I vomited, I was a mess. I hallucinated. It was terrible. And then I got on with my life, and I was depressed. I was depressed because I didn't know how to live my life, but yet I didn't drink. So there was this fundamental reality about my experience that's very important about what I'm going to say. Then the courts mandated me, they took my rights away, and they put me into treatment for a year. When I was in treatment, I was forced to rewrite my history. They said, you couldn't have quit on your own. I said, I did quit on my own. I don't have a disease. And they said, yes, you do have a disease. And then they went through a propaganda stream for the next year of my life where they said, you're always going to have a warrant out for your arrest. You're not going to get your driver's license until you give up your right and say you are powerless over alcohol.
Oh,
I said, I am not doing that. Now that's concentration camp style.
Oh, that's horrible.
It is horrible. And I got out. Well, they added 6 months because I wouldn't give in. And then after 18 months, they had twisted my head around so badly that I actually believed I was powerless. I rewrote my history. It was really, really twisted. I got out and I put a gun in my mouth. I took my hunting rifle. I was going to shoot myself. So I know what it's like to have this whole process be a part of my life. I had a moment of clarity and I said, wait a minute. I was better before I went to treatment. Why? And nobody ever answered my question as to how I have a disease. Never once in that 18 months did anybody answer that question. And that was the day I became a researcher and said, I'm going to figure out a better way for people, because this doesn't make logical sense, what we're doing.
I hope, this would be a cause, I think, for a lawsuit, but I mean, that's a negative road to go down. I mean, I've I've resisted suing people in the past for things I probably could have, because I just don't want to deal with that kind of negativity. But this is an expose. I mean, this is a real condemnation of this establishment and what they're trying to do. I
Yeah.
mean, can you imagine? This is like the Cheka in the Soviet Union. They have you like in a basement with like a rubber hose, and they're saying either you do this or you're going to suffer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is the fact that this would happen in this country is just despicable, and it's unbelievable.
Well, it's happening every day to thousands of people who get a DWI. It happens to the pilot whose pilot's license is held in hock, and they say, if you don't go to this professional rehab and acquiesce and believe in all this nonsense, and if you're never going to get your license back. And this is a guy that's maybe trained for 15 years of his life, had tons of schooling, and they use these Gestapo tactics. Here's the deal, though. The majority of people in that industry actually believe they're helping people. That's the nutty part, because
Right.
they don't know that it's not a disease. They don't know the facts. They're not taught that. That's not taught in addictionology medicine. None of that is ever mentioned. So that's
what happened to you, Mark. In a way, we all suffer from confirmation bias. We're surrounded by these lies,
That's right.
and you don't have anything to reference it against. So
Right.
you think it must be true, because if everyone's saying it and everywhere you turn, this is what's being said, then it's kind of a form of brainwashing, actually, and that includes the people who are in it, who are not conscious of it, because they accepted this stuff probably when they were in college and they never were told otherwise. This is what they were. This is the bill of goods that they were handed,
That's
and
exactly
people
right.
go through their entire life not knowing truths. I mean, in a way, the whole process of being alive is the ability to use reason and to break through
That's
these
right.
lies and to debug yourself. We all have them.
Yep.
We're all, we're exposed to all sorts of stuff. I mean, I'm a lot older than you. I'm working through stuff that I imbibed, when I was younger, even now, that I now know is untrue, but I can see that I accepted it as true because it was the only thing available to me. I mean,
That's
you
right.
look to outside sources for truth
That's
rather than looking within and saying, is this true?
that's right. There's what there's been several books, but the tyranny of experts, right? We tend to, if you have a white lab coat on and it says peer reviewed, we believe it. We don't question it. And what I've spent years doing, 3 decades now, is sifting through this mass of information with my team and coming up with what is real. Now, the way I did it was different than what any other addiction researcher had ever done. From the age of 20 till I was 32, I lived with my study subjects. I lived at my retreat. I kept notebooks, and I found patterns that were real. What was the person telling me? What was the human? I was asking the questions. And I had all sorts of ideas about how I should help people that were wrong. And I found out they were wrong. But I had to live with my mistakes. I immersed myself in the process to the degree that the person across from me would look at me and say, Mark, that's just nonsense. And I'd say, you know what? Let me look into that. And yep, it was nonsense, you know? So that process is really what built the freedom model, was being willing to find the truth, even at my own expense sometimes, you know? And that's what a real researcher does. And it's hard. It's hard to do it. Finding the truth sometimes is hard, because I came out of a treatment world. My whole family was involved in the treatment complex. You know, I was steeped in it. I went through it. Myself was brainwashed. But that little seed of me being better before treatment was what birthed truth, you know, and kept me motivated.
That's incredible. And, plus the fact that it's difficult because you're bucking the big establishment.
Yeah,
And
it
I
was not
imagine they
fun
ain't
in
too
those.
happy about it.
Yeah, it was not fun in the early years. Let me tell you, they ran me out of town more times than one. The state was against me. The entire government was pitted against me. I was in lawsuits for 15 years with the state, with people trying to copy what I was doing or slandering me. I mean, but that's a paradigm shift, right? The beginning of a paradigm shift, when you break the glass, it's an ugly process. And eventually, if you outlive all that, which I did, you come out the other side and you really understand how all this works. And now I coexist with all these enterprises fine. They don't like to mess with me because I know the facts. They don't want to debate the facts.
And also, I think the best way to approach this subject with everyday people is through kindness and friendliness, because nobody likes to be shaken and told that everything they believed in is untrue. And
Exactly right.
so, it's often best to just sort of quietly and very gently introduce these ideas. As you say, it's like a seed, that can sprout later, and rather than to kind of go in like a bull.
Yeah.
And so, how are things going now, Mark, in terms of your practice, your book? I mean, these are important things you're doing. Are you expanding around the country? Are you reaching people?
Well, we're just actually we were much larger probably 5 years ago, and I downsized when I published the Freedom Model. I downsized my operation from 3 retreats to 1. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to have the beginning of the Freedom Model where I was back involved with the people doing the research with my team, and to launch the book and make sure that the laboratory was perfected. And I couldn't do that with 109 employees, 70 guests and their families. I was managing managers, and it was a huge operation. So I took the bull by the horns. It was a scary thing to do. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, to go from that big to this tiny operation. So we're just now doing things like this, going out to the public with the polished product, saying, hey, we've been doing this 31 years. You can get over your problem. Here's a book. I actually give it away for free. You know, on our website, you can download the entire program for free. And the book is well received. It's on Amazon, has a 5-star rating. You know, people love it. They love the fact that we care. You know, in the end, I'm not making millions of dollars. I could go build a rehab with what I know and be a millionaire within months. But I'm not going to do that. We don't take insurance. We don't play the
Good.
game.
Yeah,
We
because
don't
if you start
play.
with that, they'll get you. You know,
Yeah. Well, yeah. I
you
learned
don't
that
want to
early.
mess. Once you let the government come in with anything, they're going to use that as an excuse to investigate you, and you'll be in big trouble.
That's
It's
right.
better. It's better to avoid anything like that. It's just people have to do it on their own
Yeah.
and come to you.
It keeps the research pure. It keeps the
Exactly.
research pure. You know, the first thing I did when I tried to get a license from the state, but because we didn't fit, it was anti-disease, right? Their entire model is predicated on funding for a disease. So the first thing they said is you have to get rid of your program and start with disease nomenclature. I said, I'm not doing that. That's never going to happen. I'm not treatment. I don't treat people for a non-existent condition. I'm not doing that, you know? Now I want to be clear for your audience.
Yeah.
I don't downplay that there's detox, that there's physical withdrawal. These are, but that's a toxicity issue. When the treatment industry is talking about a disease, they're saying that you have no mental and emotional control over your consumption.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, with the best professionals out there, medically, some drugs require detox. I don't argue that point. So there's two things going on. One I agree with, one I vehemently disagree with.
Well, I mean, in a sense, you're dealing with a poison, and you can build up a tolerance for it. You can get used to it, and you stop thinking about it. It becomes normal to you. I remember an interview a while back I read with Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones,
Yeah.
who said that taking these drugs became like drinking coffee in the morning.
Yes,
It
it
was
does.
like just he didn't even think about it. It became normal until he woke up one day and got off of it all.
Yeah, yeah, and that's no fun, I'll tell you.
No,
But it's really 1 to 2 weeks of your life. You get through it. It feels like the flu, and you take some medications and you get through it. It really is okay, and I want the audience to know that too. It's if you
that's
have
very
competent,
inspiring.
yeah, if you have competent, good detox. Gallus Detox is the best in the country. They do a fantastic job. They're wonderful at what they do, and yeah, if you need to physically get off the drugs, it's a simple process. It really is.
So, Mark, listen, I want to thank you for joining me today. And could you let my listeners and viewers know where they can get more information about you and your work?
Sure. It's at thefreedommodel.org, and they can call 888 424 2626.
Excellent. Mark Scheeren, I want to thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Take care.